a primitive, seemingly barren island of sand at the foot of Colorado's Sangre de Cristo Mountains. A strange, spectacular world of contrasts. Within a few thousand feet of the dunes, a panorama, a cross-section of wilderness that is the high country. The Great Sand Dunes National Monument, one of the wonders of our heritage. From the quiet, natural, evergreen world of the hiking trails, the dunes loom like gigantic waves cresting on some mysterious, tawny sea. Why here? Why sand dunes at the edge of this high mountain valley? To understand the how and why of the dunes, it's necessary to go back in time. Back 70 million years, when the Rocky Mountains were formed in a jagged line from Alaska to Mexico. Back 25 million years, when a shift at its eastern edge deepened the San Luis Valley between the Sangre de Cristo and San Juan Mountains. Glaciers shaped the mountains and then sent millions of tons of glacial debris, clay, rock, and gravel to the valley floor. Then as now, melting snows and rains from the San Juan Mountains fed into the valley, into the Rio Grande River. In time, the Rio Grande flooded, shifted its course, and left behind dry lakes of sand and silt, the debris of a million years. Dry winds across the valley, the Rio Grande flood basin, carried the sands in their sweep toward the mountains. Sometimes gentle, sometimes violent, the southwest wind blows toward the mountains. It sweeps across the sandy soil until it runs into the 14,000-foot Sangre de Cristo Range. The wind follows the path of least resistance, a path that leads to a pocket at the foot of the mountains. The funneled wind carries its cargo of sand and dust. The wind rises, surges forward, and rushes violently through low mountain passes. The turbulence causes the wind to lose energy. When the wind weakens to the point it can no longer carry sand, the sand is dropped at the base of the passes. If the winds were always from the southwest, the sand might eventually be carried over the mountains. But strong, often fierce winds from the northeast find these same passes, these same paths of least resistance, and these winds force the sands back to the valley floor. This never-ending struggle of the winds and the natural trap formed by the curvature of the mountains made the creation of the Great Sand Dunes possible. Massive mounds, some almost 700 feet high. Random forms whose shapes change and shift with time and the wind. As each grain of sand moves across the valley, as it reaches the dunes and becomes a part of them, each grain moves forward, never rising far above the ground because of its weight. It touches down briefly, is lifted again by the winds, and then falls back to earth. It's a process that geologists call saltation, rippled patterns on the sand. The distance between the ridges is the average length of travel of each grain of sand as it's hurtled forward by the wind. The sand continues to pile. The dunes grow. Then when the sand reaches its maximum angle of repose, the face avalanches. The dunes change shape and move as the sand advances layer by layer. When the southwest winds are high, the saltating grains seem to creep across the surface. They change the shapes of the dunes and thrust them forward toward the mountains. But the northeast winds can hurl them back, and the process begins again. The movement of the sand is also thwarted by Meadow Creek at the eastern edge of the dunes. The creek begins high on Meadow Pass, and as it reaches the valley floor, it forms a natural barrier before it disappears into the sand. The water undercuts the sand, and it falls into the creek. The weight of the sand forms tiny underwater dams. Then the weight of water crashes through, and the creek surges in an endless cycle of buildup and collapse. Along with the sands blown into the water by the winds, the creek sand returns to the valley floor to repeat its unending cycle. There are times when the winds will cause the sand to form new dunes. In dry years, the sands will cross Meadow Creek. Small dunes are formed, and the sand will migrate a few feet each year into areas that had once been green with life. When the sands reach a critical height, trees are often killed, partly by suffocation and partly by starvation. This stark ghost forest rises from the receding sands at the eastern edge of the dunes. Other trees, such as the cottonwood, can survive for a time by growing new roots high along their trunks. Many cling to life until the sands have moved on. The ebb and flow of sands driven by the wind. Surface temperatures that can reach 140 degrees. Lack of abundant moisture. Through the centuries, plants and animals have learned to adapt to this harsh environment. Life does exist. Along Meadow Creek, the cottonwoods. Ponderosa pine and blue grama grasses. In the dunes, a few hardy plants have adapted for survival. The Indian rice grass, the blowout grass, and the scurf pea. Long underground stems and roots anchor against the wind and search for moisture. There are insects and animals here too. The sand treader camel cricket, for example. Largely nocturnal, it avoids the blistering sun by burrowing a few inches beneath the surface of the sand. It is an adaptation unique to this area. So too is the great sand dunes tiger beetle. The kangaroo rat survives on a diet of seeds. With kidneys 5 times more efficient than man's, Its body conserves limited moisture available from its food. At night, when the temperature drops to tolerable levels, coyotes, rabbits, and deer visit the creek. By day, their tracks are mute evidence of these nocturnal visits. In winter, elk occasionally venture into the valley from the mountains. There was a time when buffalo ranged in the grasslands around the dunes, but they are gone. So are the vast herds of pronghorn. Today, only a few remain. There are times when the winds of the dunes seem to echo the forgotten sounds of the men who have moved across this land. The Ute Indians were at home here long before the Spanish and American settlers came. Other Indians, Arapaho, Cheyenne, Apache, Comanche, occasionally hunted along the banks of Metano Creek. The Spanish were among the first Europeans to explore the area. They named many of the rivers and mountains. Early Spaniards gave the nearby range of mountains its name, Sangre de Cristo, the blood of Christ Mountains. Explorers, the Army, and settlers from an expanding United States came to the San Luis Valley and the dunes. Zebulon Pike came here in search of new boundaries. Kit Carson to command nearby Fort Garland. John C. Fremont to find a route for the westward bound railroad. Miners in search of gold. And hundreds of men and women and their families in search of a new life. They're all a part of the history of the area, a part of yesterday. But the dunes are here today, living geology perhaps. But more important, a world of wonder preserved for the future, and a very special place for today.